There's a question that I think haunts everyone at some point. It definitely haunts me when I'm scrolling through the news.
Oh, for sure.
Or even just, dealing with office politics.
Yeah.
And that question is, why do people hurt each other? Like, really, why?
It's the perennial question, isn't it?
It is. And usually the answer we settle on is, well, it's pretty simple. We say that person's just bad, or they're cruel, or maybe evil.
It's a very comfortable way to look at the world. A binary.
Exactly. Good guys and bad guys.
Yeah.
But today, we're going to challenge that comfort. We're looking at a source that suggests evil might actually be the wrong word entirely.
Right. We're diving into a really fascinating document. It's dated February 2026.
So it's fresh.
Very fresh. It's titled The Paradox of Malevolence: How Interpersonal Harm Erodes the Perpetrator's Own Psychological Well-Being.
Wow. Okay.
And what stands out immediately is that it approaches violence and aggression not as a moral failing. I mean, it doesn't deny the morality of it, but as a functional error.
A functional error. That's such a clinical way to put it.
Yeah. It is, but it opens up this huge door for understanding. The central idea here is that malevolence is actually a miscalculation.
A miscalculation.
Yeah, a failed attempt to feel better. The author, Figueroa, and others in the text, they argue that you physically and psychologically cannot destroy someone else's well-being without simultaneously eroding your own.
Which, I'll be honest, sounds a little bit like wishful thinking at first.
Right, like karma.
Yeah, because we see plenty of people who seem to be doing just fine while making everyone else miserable. But the mission today is to look at the wiring, the actual psychology, and the data that might prove otherwise.
Exactly.
So let's start with this idea of the miscalculation. If hurting someone is a mistaken calculation, what is the person trying to calculate in the first place?
To understand that, we have to look at the metaphor the text uses, which I think is just brilliant.
Okay.
It describes human beings as walking thermostats.
I love this visual. So we're just walking around regulating temperature.
In a psychological sense, yes. Think about a literal thermostat in your house. Its entire job is to maintain equilibrium.
Homeostasis.
Right. If the temperature drops too low, the heater kicks on. If it spikes, the AC kicks on. The goal is always stability.
Got it.
Well, the source argues that our psyche operates on this exact same principle. Every single action we take, whether it's eating a sandwich because we're hungry or calling a friend because we're lonely, is an attempt to regulate our internal state.
Okay, so that makes perfect sense for positive things. I feel a lack, so I fill it. But how does that apply to, punching someone in the face?
That's the glitch. That's where the glitch happens. The source emphasizes, and this is crucial, that no one truly seeks their own destruction.
No one wants to self-destruct.
No. So even when someone lashes out, they're trying to regulate. Let's say someone feels a sudden drop in their internal temperature. Maybe they feel powerless or disrespected or just chaotic inside.
So they're feeling pain.
Exactly. And to fix that pain, to get the temperature back up, they lash out. They might insult someone to feel dominant. They might use violence to feel powerful. For a split second, that aggression acts like a heater.
It gives them a rush.
A rush of relief or control. It spikes the temperature.
So in that immediate moment, the calculation actually works.
Short term, yes. And that is the trap. The source references Anderson and Bushman, who describe this paradox perfectly. We harm to feel good, but the specific method we used, harming another person, guarantees that our long-term well-being is going to crash.
It's like taking out a payday loan with 500% interest to buy a candy bar.
That's a perfect analogy.
You get the sugar rush right now,
Yeah.
but you have guaranteed that you're going to be bankrupt next week.
That is it. And the interest you pay isn't financial, it's psychological. The text calls it a short-term loan that results in the erosion of the self.
Let's dig into that erosion, because the text gets very specific about what happens inside the mind of the perpetrator. It brings up a concept most people have heard of, cognitive dissonance. But I feel like it's often misused.
It really is. So cognitive dissonance. The idea comes from Festinger back in 1957.
Right.
Imagine your mind, your self-concept as a puzzle. And for most of us, the core pieces of that puzzle are, positive. I am a rational person.
I'm a decent human being.
I'm not a monster. That's a big one.
Right. Even people who do terrible things usually rationalize them so they can keep believing they're the hero of the story.
Exactly. We need that internal consistency. But then imagine you do something harmful. You hurt a friend, you betray a partner, you strike someone. Suddenly you're holding a new puzzle piece.
And that piece is, I just caused pain.
Right.
And it doesn't fit the, I am a decent person picture.
It creates a clash, a total mismatch. That is the dissonance. And it's not just a thought, it's a state of physiological and mental tension.
It's just stressful.
Very. The source uses this really vivid image here. Harming another person creates a crack in the internal mirror. When you look at yourself, the reflection is distorted.
But don't people just rationalize it away?
Yeah.
You know, he deserved it, or I had no choice.
Oh, we try. We definitely try. We slap those rationalizations on, like, Band-Aids over the crack in the mirror.
But it's just a Band-Aid.
It's just a Band-Aid. The expert perspective in the text is that those are surface repairs. Deep down, the dissonance persists. It creates this low-level chronic stress. You know the puzzle doesn't fit, even if you're lying to yourself about it.
And that stress leads to what the text calls fragmentation of the self.
Yes. It's a rupture in your identity. You stop feeling whole. And if you let that fester, it deepens into something even heavier. Moral injury.
I've usually heard moral injury used in the context of war soldiers who have to do things that go against their conscience.
That's the classic example, yeah.
But the source says this applies to everyday life.
It does. Litz and his colleagues describe moral injury as a rupture of character. It's what happens when you transgress your own deeply held moral beliefs. And the text makes a really important distinction here between guilt and shame.
Ah, okay. I think we use those words interchangeably a lot. What's the difference here?
It's huge. Guilt is, I did something bad. It focuses on the action.
So it's about behavior.
Exactly. And it can actually be healthy because it might drive you to apologize, to make amends.
Okay. And shame.
Shame is, I am bad.
Oof.
It focuses on the self. It tells you that you are fundamentally defective. And when someone falls into that toxic shame, they don't apologize. They hide. They withdraw, isolate.
Which leads to what you said was the most disturbing part of this.
Yeah, perhaps the most disturbing mechanism described in the source. Self-dehumanization.
This was the part that really stopped me in my tracks. We always talk about dehumanizing the victim.
Right, calling them animals or objects to make it easier to hurt them.
But you're saying the perpetrator does this to themselves.
It sounds backward, doesn't it? But follow the logic. If I believe that human beings are generally moral and empathetic,
Which most of us do.
and I have just done something incredibly cruel, then I cannot be a human being.
Wow. So to resolve the dissonance, they literally strip away their own humanity.
It's a desperate coping mechanism. To live with the horror of their actions, they unconsciously decide, I must be a monster or I must be a beast. Bastian and some other researchers found that perpetrators often view themselves as having less human nature than others.
That is just tragic.
It is, and it has a cost. If you view yourself as less than human, you lose your dignity, you lose your self-worth. And the data bears this out. This state leads directly to depression, anxiety, and a total collapse of well-being.
So you start out trying to regulate your thermostat, trying to feel a little more powerful or in control.
Right.
And you end up convincing yourself you aren't even fully human. That is the definition of a backfire.
That is the paradox of malevolence.
Now, the text moves from this sort of internal wreckage to the broader picture. Because we don't live in vacuums.
No, we live in relationships.
And the source uses this metaphor of cutting the branch you were sitting on.
Right. This is based on social interdependence theory. We are a social species. We are woven into this web of connection, and we rely on that web for our survival, for our sanity.
Okay.
When you harm someone, you are severing a strand of that web. But because you are sitting on that web, when you cut the connection, you fall too.
And this leads us to the source's main theoretical contribution. It's a model with a very specific acronym, DASBian.
Yes, the relational model of well-being self-regulation, or DASBian.
That's a mouthful.
It is, I know. But it's actually a beautiful framework for understanding how love and harm work, mechanically.
Okay, so the author breaks this down into 3 pillars, what they call the triangle of loving. I want to walk through these because they explain exactly what breaks when we hurt someone.
Let's do it.
The first pillar is subjectivizing.
Right. Subjectivizing means seeing the other person as a subject, not an object.
So a real person.
A real person. It means realizing they have an internal world, feelings, and value that is equal to yours. You aren't just an NPC in my video game, you are real.
Okay, so acknowledging their humanity. What's the second pillar?
The second is intending. This is about your will. It's not enough to just see them. You have to actively intend for their good. You have to want them to be well.
And third.
The third is feedback, and this is the one people often forget.
Right.
You have to verify that your action actually landed. Did the other person feel loved? Did they feel respected? You can't just assume. You have to check their reality.
See them as real, want their good, and check that they received it.
Exactly. And the Daspian model argues that human well-being flows through this circuit. We receive love, we give love to ourselves, and we give love to others. It's a cycle.
And when you harm someone,
You break the triangle. You stop subjectivizing them. You make them an object. You intend harm. And you ignore the feedback of their pain.
and because the circuit is broken, the energy stops flowing. You disconnect yourself from the very thing that keeps you psychologically alive.
Precisely. You are left isolated with that broken mirror we talked about earlier.
Now, I can hear some of our more skeptical listeners thinking, okay, this is very poetic,
Triangles of love, broken mirrors.
but is this science? And the source is very careful to pivot here to the hard data. This isn't just karma, it's clinical.
It is absolutely clinical. The evidence is robust. The source cites a study by Gilbert and his colleagues that is really telling. They looked at the mental health profiles of people who are violent or harmful.
And what did they find?
They found significantly higher rates of depression, anxiety, and even suicidal ideation.
But I have to play devil's advocate here. Couldn't you argue that miserable people are just more likely to be violent?
Sure.
That the depression caused the violence, not the other way around?
That's the most common counterargument. But the study controlled for that. Even when you account for background, poverty, a history of being a victim, past trauma, the act of being violent itself is an independent predictor of mental illness.
That's a huge distinction.
It is. There is even a specific term mentioned: perpetrator depression. It's a distinct form of depression rooted in that guilt and self-loathing we discussed.
That's a hopelessness.
A hopelessness that comes from feeling you've destroyed your own value.
And it's not just depression, right? The text also talks about anxiety, about hypervigilance.
Yes. Tangney and her colleagues describe this state. Deep down, when you harm someone, you know you have violated the social contract.
You've broken the rules of the tribe.
You have. So your brain, specifically the primitive parts, starts waiting for the consequences.
You're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Constantly. You become paranoid. You're watching your back. You're waiting for the police or for revenge or just for social rejection. Your cortisol levels, the stress hormones, stay permanently elevated.
You're in fight or flight all the time.
You are living in a physiological war zone that you created.
It sounds exhausting.
It is exhausting, and it destroys the body and the mind over time, which is why the source mentions that we often see PTSD in perpetrators.
Right. We usually think of PTSD as something that happens to victims.
We do, but research on perpetration-induced traumatic stress showed that the person pulling the trigger or throwing the punch can be traumatized by their own actions.
So they relive it.
They have nightmares, they have flashbacks, they relive the moment of violence. The harm they put out into the world comes back to haunt them, literally.
It really dismantles that Hollywood idea of the cool, calculated villain who just walks away in slow motion.
It shatters it.
The reality is a person who is paranoid, depressed, and haunted by their own actions.
Exactly. They tried to fix their internal thermostat, but they ended up breaking the machine entirely.
So if the machine is broken, how do we fix it? Because if we accept this view that malevolence is a failed regulation strategy, then our standard way of dealing with bad guys seems totally off.
It's completely wrong.
We usually just punish them, shame them, and lock them up.
Oh, right. And if the root cause of the behavior is a lack of self-regulation and deep, deep shame, then adding more shame usually just makes the problem worse.
It just confirms the "I am a monster" narrative.
It does, which leads to more isolation and often more violence.
So what does the source propose?
It argues for restorative justice, but not just as a buzzword. It's about functional repair. If the problem is a broken connection cutting the branch, the solution has to be rebuilding that connection.
And how does that look practically?
It involves moral repair. The perpetrator has to confess, not just to avoid punishment, but to own the reality of the harm. They have to ask for forgiveness. And crucially, they have to engage in acts that restore that triangle of loving.
So by repairing the harm done to the other person, they're actually repairing the crack in their own mirror.
Yes, that's the key. Reconnecting with the victim or the community heals the perpetrator's own internal rupture. It allows them to change their narrative from "I am a monster who destroys" to "I am a flawed human who is making things right."
It restores their humanity.
And that is the only way to truly lower recidivism. You can't punish someone into mental health. You have to help them rebuild the branch they cut.
This has been a pretty intense journey today. We've gone from the mechanics of thermostat to the deep philosophy of love and connection. So let's try to bring it all together.
Let's do it.
If we had to summarize the paradox of malevolence, what is the headline?
The headline is that well-being is not a solo sport. We started with the idea that people harm others to regulate their own mood,
To feel better.
to feel better. But we found that it's a trap. It causes cognitive dissonance, it fractures the self, and it leads to tangible, clinical mental illness.
So the takeaway is, you cannot build a happy life on the foundation of someone else's suffering.
You can't. The structure will always collapse because you are damaging the very mind you use to experience that life.
Before we go, I want to leave our listener with the final note from the source because it's a question that has been sticking with me since I read it.
It's a powerful reframing.
It is. The source asks, if we truly understand that harming others is an act of self-sabotage, a way of destroying our own peace, how does that change how we react to the bad people in our lives?
It really shifts the perspective, doesn't it?
It does. Instead of just seeing a monster to be feared, you see someone who is actively dismantling their own well-being in real time. It doesn't excuse the behavior, not at all, but it certainly changes how you see the human being behind it.
And perhaps more importantly, it changes how you handle your own moments of anger. When you feel that urge to lash out, to scream, to hurt, it's a reminder
A reminder of what?
that the price you pay is your own peace of mind.
A huge thank you to the authors of this research for giving us such a different lens to look through. And thank you to you for listening and diving deep with us.
Take care of your thermostat out there.
See you next time.